All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us for episode 12 of the Trap House Podcast. I'm Justin Jett, and today's guest, we have Ron Leggett and Robert Colona out of Maryland. These I can't say enough about these two, and you'll see in the interview if you don't already know who they are. Remarkable trappers, full of knowledge and experience, and I'll actually get a chance to hang out with Robert again here in a couple weeks up at the Trappers College, so I'll be up there doing the media. I'm kind of the picture taker, film guy, so I'll be shooting a lot of shots and hanging out with a bunch of different trappers. So hopefully we'll get the chance to find some downtime, which there really isn't much of any at the Trappers College, but hopefully we can sneak in a couple podcasts there. That'd be great. But yeah, that's today's show. Before we jump into that, I'm just going to let you guys know the new format of what I'm trying to do here. A lot of this has been kind of random when I'm releasing, but I think it's a good idea to alternate with the Hoosier Trapper Outdoor Show we got going on. Comes out every other Friday. So I'm going to start releasing every other Friday in between that. So this week will be, obviously, if you're listening to this now on the release date, next week we'll have Hoosier Trapper Outdoors, and then the following week, the Trap House Podcast. So we'll bounce back and forth, so it's kind of nice. And I'll go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. For episode 13, we have Chris Pope. You may know him off YouTube. He's got quite a following on YouTube. He has a podcast. You might have heard the name Coyote Trapping School. That's all with Chris. Had a chance to talk to him at the NTA. Heck of a guy, which was kind of cool because since he does a podcast as well and we have ours, obviously, we kind of went back and forth. We kind of interviewed each other, and it's kind of like a dual podcast, you know. We're breaking rules, I guess. So tune in for that one. So that's going to be in 2 weeks before we release Chris Pope. And before we jump in and talk with Ron and Robert, got to give it up to the sponsors for making this possible. We have J3 Outdoors, J3O.com, the maker of the Hags Bracket. He's got quite the product and quite the following as well. A lot of trappers are using his product. Jeff's a great guy. Check his website out. He's on Facebook as well. And then also we have Top Lot Stretcher Company. In fact, I think right now, if I noticed on their website, I think they're in Wyoming right now for the trapping convention that's going on for the next few days. So if you're there, stop by their booth, say the Trap House sent you. You know, pick up a couple supplies. They got an awesome adjustable stretcher. That way you can save on some shipping if you're at that convention out that way out west. So, yeah, that's Top Lot Stretcher Company. And that's toplotstretcherco.com if you want to look for it online. And, of course, we have Hoosier Trapper Supply. Charlie's got the new catalog at the printer right now. It's almost done. We're getting ready to send a bunch of them out. So if you would like one, they're free. You can request one at HoosierTrapperSupply.com, or you can call us here at the shop anytime. It's 317-881-3075, and we'll just put you down on the list, and when they come out, we'll send them your way. But that's all I wanted to mention. It's been a good summer. I know a lot of guys are getting prepping stuff for season. It'll be here before we know it. A lot of guys trying to get waxed dirt together and things like that. And hopefully everything's going smooth as far as preparation. But all right, let's hop into it. Thanks for listening. All right, we've got another podcast here, and I don't even know where to begin. We have so much talent and years in the field of trapping. And this is our first. This is our second podcast that we have 4 people talking at once, so we'll try and keep it so it's not too chaotic. But we're joined today with 3 legends in my book.
2.
You're a legend, Charlie. My father-in-law is a legend. But we have Mr. Ron Leggett. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
And Robert?
Colona.
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 Yeah.
I thought it was Corona because you sit on the beaches sometimes.
No.
No? Okay.
I don't have a beach body.
I found him on the beach a few times.
But yeah.
Both from Maryland.
Yep. Maryland Trappers.
Mm-hmm.
Before we jump in, why don't you guys give us a little background of how you become friends, not only in that aspect, but how you guys started trapping as well. We'll
you want to start with me, or?
Yeah, we'll start with you, Ron.
Well, this is Ron Leggett, and actually, my dad and I got bet we couldn't catch a red fox when I was 17 years old, and from that bet, we really got into trapping hard, and then we got into running around to different shows, trying to learn what we could, and meeting, and got into politics. And Robert came into our life. If you want to know how him and I and our family got together, Robert came into our life through the biology aspect. He was a biologist for the state of Maryland. I'll let him give his story, but the fact that he was very beneficial to all trappers, not just to my family, but to all trappers. We very quickly became friends with Robert.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise, he's not a friend, he's family. And I feel that way about a lot of trappers, but this guy has definitely proven his worth in my world, and I'm glad to have him as a friend.
That's good.
So, to back up, Ron, you and your dad trapped a lot of fox. I mean, you built up from not being able to catch them to catching huge numbers of red foxes. Right.
That's true.
Yeah, and then you've trapped out of state as well.
Yes, we spent a lot of 33 years in Texas,
Yeah.
3 years in Wyoming. My father won the world championship coyote trapping contest in New Mexico. We trapped Arizona, Illinois, Michigan. Went through a lot of trapping together. Yes, we did travel around. Our bulk catch was Texas and Maryland, where we caught the most numbers in the days that we worked.
Mm-hmm. And that was, for those of you that are young and don't remember the days when we had red fox in the Midwest, you guys still got red fox now, or still have red fox presently.
Our numbers have declined like they did out west to some degree from the coyote population. We went through a period here the last 3 years where I think red fox actually had some type of a parvo or something that depleted them a little more.
Mm-hmm.
But the coyote has definitely affected our population.
Mm-hmm.
We do still have them, especially in Eastern Shore and the eastern section of the Western Shore.
Mm-hmm.
We do have quite a fox population.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do quite well. It's like any trapping experience. The hours you put in the field, the effort you work on getting them caught versus the amount of predators out there is what makes things happen. You got to have numbers of predators, and you got to have a lot of hours of work to produce them. Dad and I were dairy farmers, two separate farms, but dairy farmers, and the work ethics was very strong in our family.
Right. So, yeah, you'd probably get done milking and then go hit the line, I would assume.
That's correct. Yeah, we'd get done milking. We'd run line from about 6 to 7 o'clock in the morning till 4 or 5 in the afternoon because you had to get back home. I like to put the milkers on at 4 in the morning, 4 in the evening.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was pretty much all day checking traps. So we'd run, if you want to get into that section, we ran about 40 farms apiece, which meant 80 traps in the ground. That's about our average.
Okay.
We each had actually 2 separate lines. Mine was a complete separate line. You'd run that first line until the population was dropping off and gradually move your traps around to the other locations. So that we had, in a 2-month period, we actually run 2 different areas.
Okay.
And we did that same thing when we worked the water, working down in we did a lot of water trap from February 1st to March 15th in a boat. And as the coon population dropped, we gradually shift our traps, and that's why you could keep the numbers up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is key. You need fresh ground. You know.
Need fresh ground, fresh animals.
Yeah.
And the nice part was about the system that we did, and I'm sure many other trappers use, is the fact that, and Robert can contest to this through biology that he's done and the trapping he's done, that you take a population down that winter, but there's so much void area you created. There's always that extra population out there that's hunting new territory. You go back the next year and literally catch the same amount of animals, sometimes even more. So
Yeah.
we never hurt the population. There was always a good population of red fox, raccoons, or disease. Disease hits them, they will not tolerate that.
Right.
We had
right.
parvo to wipe our fox out one year, but
Yeah.
we was very fortunate to have the expertise and the population to make it work.
Yeah. I got to say, just to back up a little bit, I got to know both of these guys. They've both been around forever and known their names forever, and got to know both of them through the Trappers College, but helping up there. And Ron has since retired from the college, and about the time he retired, I think, is about the time you came to the college, Robert.
Yep.
So it's we have a good time up there, and get to know great people and great trappers. So, but. We've mentioned it before, but if you ever get the opportunity to go to the Trappers College, it's well worth
Yes,
going.
Dad and I were invited to go to the Trappers College to teach, and I told the instructors, Charlie Parks and Jerry Joe and Gary Jepson, told them I need to go through the college first so I could learn something.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't something that I felt that my father and I was that experienced, because there's so much to learn.
Right.
And the day you stop learning is the day you'll stop trapping anyway. But I just felt honored to be asked. And once I got in there teaching, I enjoyed it very much. I had worked politically for a long time to get Robert involved, because my view of the college was, if you know an expert out there that you feel has the abilities to teach above and beyond my expertise, and he knows how to do it, I felt Robert was one of the very good asset to come on board.
Mm-hmm.
And when Robert Colona was chose to come to do his PowerPoint presentations, I knew that they would fall in love with Robert out there, and I'm glad he's there. I hope he stays.
Yeah.
And
Well, some
enjoys it.
love him.
Well, now that's a good point. That's good.
Ron
I've
doesn't
been
love me all the time.
I've been beating on him there pretty hard on this podcast. Giving him a lot of love, but every now and then we got to straighten one another out.
Yeah. The mountain lions going through Hagerstown.
He brings up the subject there, mountain lion. I've seen the tracks. I've got proof that they're here in Maryland, but he swears.
There's no proof.
He swears,
This could
He
be a
won't-
good debate, right?
I would kiss him on Main Street in the town center if they could go ahead and identify a mountain lion. Part of my job is I investigated mountain lion sightings in Maryland, and if there was a mountain lion, somebody had to bring it here in a cage in the back of their truck.
Or you just got turned loose or got let loose or whatever.
Well, their home ranges are so big, their energy requirements are so great, that if there was one, whether it had been turned loose or was naturally occurring, it'd be shot by a hunter, run over by a vehicle, or it'd been on a game camera.
Yeah.
There he said the very thing that contradict what he just said. He said that their range is very large.
It is. In the state
Enough said.
the state of Maryland is pretty densely populated, especially out near you, and someone would have provided evidence.
Robert, you want to give us some background so you can back up your
Yeah.
expert opinion there?
Okay.
Yeah.
It'll take him a minute.
That's true. That's true. I got my mentor and big brother sitting beside me. I'm Robert Colona. I started trapping when I was a kid. That love of trapping helped form what my future was going to be. I went to undergraduate school and majored in wildlife management, and then I went to graduate school and majored in wildlife with a specific goal of becoming a fur bearer biologist. And the research I did when in graduate school revolved around fox and synthetic attractants. So I learned quite a bit there. I think being a trapper has made me a much better biologist. And I think being a biologist has made me be a much better trapper.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, I worked as a fur bearer biologist for the state of Maryland for 23 years. Now I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I function as a fur bearer biologist and a trapper. And I go around the northeast region of the Fish and Wildlife Service trapping. And that's to address protection of threatened and endangered species, predation on them, or facilities management. I remove a whole lot of beaver that are impacting things, and a whole lot of predators. And I really enjoy it because I get sent all over the place, and every place is different, and every place has unique challenges. So that's part of it. And what Ron said earlier about the day you stop learning is the day you quit trapping, I agree with, and that's why I like trapping so much. You never learn at all, and
Right.
it's a constant challenge, and you learn more every single day that you're out there, and that's why I enjoy it. Now I do want to correct Ron.
My mother was the only one to do that.
When we first met was prior to me being a biologist. I was in graduate school, and I went to graduate school at the University of Maryland's Appalachian Environmental Lab, and I was trapping as part of my research, and I placed an order with Ron, and I found out later that they were very hesitant to fill the order because I was with the environmental lab, and they thought I was a humaniac.
Humaniac, I like that.
And then after we met shortly after that, and I rode on the line with him, and he taught me a lot. And through the years, I've learned a whole lot from Ron. And I kid him because I know it bothers him, but I tell him he's my mentor. So.
I don't know if you can grab him. Well, you can grab him there because we're not on video. But
Yeah, the point I want to bring up, Robert kept saying Ron, but
Well, Ron and Pete.
and I got to bring in Dad because without him, I wouldn't be sitting here on a podcast today. We were more than father-son. We were brothers.
right.
Worked together every day. He died in my arms. Took care of him as he died for several weeks. But Robert was one of my dad's picks as well. Dad thought the world of Robert, and I'm sure he still does up there in heaven. But we got to put Dad in that equation. And the time you placed the order, I know him and I sat there and talked about, you know what? I bet that's one of them. So going back to Robert, I'll have to give him more credit than he gave himself. He's not only well educated, but from his education, he was able to work with the politics in Maryland. I want to say, being he was employed by the state, he actually did it, some of it incognito, under the table.
A lot of it.
A lot of it under table because of his employment at the time. But he was very involved with that Destroy the Myth, getting things put
the
together
video
for that as
Yeah.
well. He also, when we got ready for trying to fight the antis by having trapper education and a trapper's license in Maryland, he was one of the main routes to make that work properly and he wrote the test that Maryland currently is giving. So he deserves a lot of credits for trapping overall. He's been a wonderful asset to trappers, not only in Maryland, but across the country. The statement was made to me many years ago, and Dad was alive when it was made. Robert is one of the top 10 biologists in Maryland, and that came from some elite biologists from up in New York.
In Maryland or in?
I said across. Did I say across the United States?
Well,
No, you said Maryland.
you said Maryland. You
No.
mean across
Robert
the country?
It was told to us that Robert was one of the top 10 biologists in the United States. If I said Maryland, I'm sorry, but and that was told to us by a gentleman, another biologist in New York. He was well known. He's been contacted by people in France and everything else. So
all
over. So give yourself a lot of credit, boy. You're an asset to our trapping communities, and going to hopefully be an asset at the college for a long time to come.
Well, I want to thank you. I'm not going to kiss you when we're done with this for your kind words, but I got to all the things aren't necessarily true. What political success we had in Maryland was a cooperative effort between Ron and just a handful of key trappers in Maryland.
Yeah, I agree.
And then when I went with it, was a conservation director for NTA, we used a lot of the same strategies and things to move NTA forward and be successful. Right. But one thing I want to back up, when describing myself, we talked a lot about this political stuff and being a biologist, but first and foremost, I'm a trapper. And I ran long lines for many, many years, and now when I go on the road, I'll be gone for 5 weeks at a time, trapping 7 days a week. So, yeah, I'm a biologist, but I'm also a real trapper. So,
well, that's good you give yourself that credit, because I agree with you on your trapping abilities. Most people, when you say I'm a biologist, you figure that's about where their level is. But you've got way beyond that level when it comes to trapping. You do a fantastic job of explanation and showing people proper ways to do things. You are definitely a trapper.
And you were my mentor.
And if I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, Robert, you were saying at the college that your dad didn't feel that your trapping in your younger years had a future to it.
Yeah, when I was a teenager, he told me I needed to give up that trapping, that I'd never be able to make a living at it. Well, my whole career, I've made a living at trapping, not necessarily selling pelts, but the employment that surrounds it and associated with it.
Right.
You know, when I was a fur bearer biologist, I still trapped fur. I also trapped for research. And then I worked with the user groups, the Trapping Association, and developed harvest regulations and all that. So my whole career has circled around trapping. And honestly, I don't know what else I could do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very fortunate that I've been able to make a living doing what I do.
And I got to say, congratulations are in order for both of you. Ron Leggett was inducted into the Trappers College, Fur Takers Trappers College Hall of Fame last evening.
Yes, and thank you.
And Robert, you were inducted into the NTA Hall of Fame last year.
Yes.
Which your parents were able to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They made sure they were there. They were going to come to this convention. They wanted to come, and we had reserved a room, but Mom fell on Mother's Day and broke 4 ribs. Then Dad fell on Father's Day and broke his femur.
Oh my gosh!
So they didn't make it.
Yeah. So I'm assuming your dad's adjusted his opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has.
I think I think a lot of us have had that discussion with our parents in our younger years about
what to do and where to go.
And and I'm glad you enjoy trapping, but I'm not, I don't know where that's going to lead you at some point, So my whole life's been revolved around it as well. But I think for most it probably doesn't work that way, but certainly for us it did. But
and again, I've got to reiterate that Ron has had a lot of influence on me, and personally, politically, and then a lot with trapping. I learned a lot from him. We do a lot of things differently, but I learned a whole lot from him. And it really dawned on me when I was at the Trappers College. And I looked, Dave Hastings was doing a demo that Pete Askins had done. And I think back to Pete really influenced me. I went to the Trappers College in the early 80s. And I looked at some of the similarities in how I trap with Pete, and there's a whole lot of similarities about how I trap with Ron. So he's been a big influence.
Yeah, I think all of us have been influenced by others, obviously, to develop our trapping.
If you don't allow that, you'll never achieve a high level of proficiency.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, everything is based on prior development of whatever it is.
Yep.
So, yeah, clearly very important.
Going back to what Charlie said about the awards, none of us, including you, Charlie, you don't do it for an award.
No, we don't.
No, it's just the respect from the people that see what you're doing, that they give you those awards.
Right.
Very touching to me, but it's never done for an award. I never felt that I'm better than anyone else out there in the field. I just do what I do because I love what I do.
Right.
And that's what makes the world go around and makes it click.
Right.
So definitely awards are not sought after by, I'm sure, Robert or I or you.
Right.
We do it out of the love of our heart.
Right. Right. This is clearly a passion, clearly a lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
clearly.
It is. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah. Clearly something that we've been ingrained in for our entire lives, basically, at this point. So, it's, I never expected to get the recognition that I've had, so it's nice to be recognized, but that's certainly not the reason for doing this. So, and even going to the Trappers College, staying home financially would be better than going up there, but I feel like it's very important. I feel like it's a really good week, and
It's leaving a legacy.
Yeah.
And I look back at the 17 years I spent there and the transfer of instructors and assistant instructors, and the college has always been adamant about keeping good people in the front of their students, making sure they learned from people that had good knowledge. Not they were better than the student even. I had students in my class that I learned from when I was there.
Yeah.
I'd have that student share his knowledge with my class. So you're not better than them. You're sharing knowledge between one another.
Right.
And when they said that Charlie Messichek was coming, I was very honored to know that you were stepping in to teach there. It was very nice to have you come on board out there to college. I felt that was going to be a real good asset to the college. I found out at Lee Steinmeier has come in there. Another peer of mine that is not only is the knowledge, but his ability to teach and his personality will help other people keep going. I think somebody said last night, the personalities that you learn and how to deal with life in general is so important. I think maybe it was Tom
Miranda. Yeah.
Miranda made that comment, and it's very important to understand that. And we're not only there teaching that, but to understand what life is about and how to treat other people.
Right.
Is brought into the aspect of it. It's very good.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Robert, you want to talk about some of the big projects that you've been involved in? I know you're involved in nutria eradication.
Yeah. The first real big projects I was involved with were development of BMPs.
Okay.
And I represented the NTA on the multinational committees where we came up with BMPs, design research, things like that. Sometimes it was real difficult for me because I would be on the opposite side of the table from many of my professional peers, and I argued with them and pushed a more trapper-friendly agenda than a lot of my peers were coming forth with. Some type of standards are okay, but they got to be practical and functional and still provide animal welfare attributes.
Right.
And a lot of the things that were put on the table wouldn't necessarily have provided that. So again, I went there as a trapper. I just so happened to have biological skills that helped in these discussions while I was there. And then, since I've been with the Fish and Wildlife Service, I've done a ton of big projects, starting with the Chesapeake Bay Nutria Eradication Project. I have been the administrator for that project. USDA does the field work. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who I work for, funds the project. But since then, And we haven't located a nutria, I believe, in 4 years now. So the project is getting ready to end in a year, and we'll declare eradication. And that's over a huge area. The Delmarva Peninsula includes portions of Virginia, Maryland, and all of Delaware. So it was over a large, large area, many hundreds of thousands of acres. And most people doubted that we'd ever achieve that, but we did eventually. Since then, did you have a question, Charlie?
Yeah, for those that don't understand why they needed to be eradicated.
Okay.
So,
Nutria are an invasive, exotic species. They're not native to Maryland. They're from parts of South America. And typically, if you have a non-native species introduced and it survives, then the populations just go crazy because there's no natural checks and balances built into the ecosystem to control their populations. They're not a problem in South America because they evolved in those ecosystems. But here they had uncontrolled growth. We lost many, many tens of thousands of acres of high quality wetlands around the Chesapeake Bay region and up into the headwaters of some of our major rivers. And there's a few reasons why that's concerning. One of the ones that we used effectively to sell the project to get funding was what you pay for a crab cake, if you like seafood, is determined by nutria populations because they eat out those wetland nursery grounds where both finfish and shellfish thrive and have their young. So when you're losing those acres of marsh, it will not support as many of those associated species. And it took a long time, but we were able to get funding, get approval by Congress, and to implement the project. And it's been a learning process, really hard work.
yeah. That, the and invasive species seem to be
Oh, yeah.
a huge problem, both in plant life and
Yeah.
animal life. So,
In Maryland, around the Chesapeake Bay, we now have snakeheads
yeah.
and blue catfish, neither of which are native. And again, they've survived, and now you have uncontrolled growth, and that impacts native species that were always there.
And it's interesting that in their native area where they were supposed to be,
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work where they weren't originally supposed to be. That's yeah.
And one of the most interesting quotes, I guess, or statements that I ever heard about nutria and nutria control was from a biologist in Louisiana. And Louisiana has serious problems there. The extent of their population is so large that they'll never be able to eradicate them. They can control them, but not eradicate them. But someone asked a biologist from there about the uncontrolled growth, and he was saying about we don't have the predation that they had in their native environment. And someone said, well, what about alligators? And he said, well, we got a lot of alligators, but they can only eat so many nutrients. and that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
When I hear people talk about predation controlling populations, and usually that never occurs. If anything, it's the opposite. The prey numbers control predator numbers, because if there's not enough prey base, predator numbers decline. So other than specialized circumstances with wildlife populations, it's truly the prey that control the predators.
That all makes sense.
So, what other?
Oh,
You got any other ones you want to highlight?
There's just too many over all these years.
The last couple of years, some of the interesting ones I've done. I went up by Lake Erie this year on a refuge to control beaver. Beaver had all their impoundments dammed up, and that did not allow the refuge to manipulate the water levels for waterfowl. In fact, if they hadn't shown me where some of the water control structures were, I'd have never known they were there. They were so dammed up. And I went in this year and removed a ton of beaver, a whole lot of them. And I reached the conclusion that beaver trapping is for young, big, strong, dumb people. It's not for old fat men.
I'm not particularly overweight, but I will 100% agree. It is a lot of work and a lot of heavy lifting. So yeah.
But that was a fun project. And what's really fun about a lot of these projects is, one, the unique challenges. But I get to go to some really neat places that most people don't get to see.
Yeah.
And then other projects, I go to New Jersey for 5 weeks a year to trap on those beaches, to control predation on piping plover and least tern and some other endangered shorebirds. And, you know, again, I get to see stuff from seals to you name it that most people never get to see. And it's real enjoyable. I trap predators to control predation on bog turtles, which are a little tiny critically endangered turtle found in bogs in the Northeast. And I control predators, and I also control beaver on those areas, because in boggy areas, that's the perfect place for beaver to build dams. Well, once they build dams and the water stays on there, the bog turtles are gone.
Yeah.
And, you know, I do a bunch of different projects like this, and I mainly trap fox, coyote, coons, possum, beaver are the main species I go after. But it's all real enjoyable. It's really hard work because it's 7 days a week for months on end.
Right.
But I like that, and I like the going away on the road and doing it, because then I only have to focus on one thing.
Right.
Right.
For 24 hours a day, I get to focus on that one thing and not worry about everything else.
Right.
That makes it enjoyable.
When we take the out-of-state trapping trips, that's what I always
exactly
say.
what it's like.
Yeah,
Yep.
we can leave, and we have the phone. But other than that, that's our focus. We
Oh.
don't have to worry about hurry up and getting back to work and all the other issues. You know.
A
So
lot of the places I go, you don't have phone coverage.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I like
Same
that
here,
too.
yeah. Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I wish they had never invented cell phones.
From somebody that's carrying an old flip phone. So yeah.
That's right. I'm digitally challenged.
That's funny.
To jump in a little bit on what Robert was going through, those explanations of his biology work that he's done, it took me back to the Miss Maryland pageant, where for the 29 years, my dad and I started giving Miss Maryland a fur coat 29 years ago. Now Maryland Fur Trappers is buying the furs from us and making her a coat. And for the almost 29 years, Robert's put together a very nice PowerPoint presentation for the girls, where he goes through and explains a lot of what he was just talking about. And that education to people that come from that lifestyle is critical to the future of trapping, that people understand why we do it. Not only that we enjoy it, but we're out there protecting other animals and wildlife and helping them survive better.
That's an awesome follow-up to that, because you know, if they don't have a baseline for,
Right.
they're not going to get it. They're not going to go seek it out on their own.
No, and I commented to Ron we just did the orientation last Sunday for this year, and in 29 years we've only had 2 of the contestants that we make them fill out a contract, and the contract essentially says, if you win, will you accept this fur coat? And in 29 years, only 2 people have declined, and they didn't win anyway. But I spoke to Ron. I said, you know, if we didn't do this orientation, I bet you there'd be a significant number that would put on that contract that they would not accept the coat.
Right.
Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah, that's a great idea. You know. Yeah, I'm sure you remember when Bob Barker decided that he wasn't going to host one of the pageants because they were giving fur coats as prizes, and it's turned it. Obviously, it worked in his behalf because he got a lot of publicity, and you know. So, but yeah, that's a great idea for that, and I'm glad you guys did that.
But I also commented to Ron last Sunday that we're getting too old to do this,
We need to find some up and coming,
Yeah.
People. So, and that we just recently did a survey of fur taker members and of the respondents, and you got to, the survey only means so much, but the respondents, the average age was 62.6 age of the members of fur takers. So, obviously the guy that was 90 and the guy that was 29, that, pretty much equal to that. But I mean, that's an old group. I mean, that's,
Yes.
that's a very concerning thing. So we need more young people
Yes.
recruit. So
The bad part about society today is where they're being raised.
right, the disconnect.
The lifestyle that we were raised in, there's a big disconnect. And until something serious happens to that multi-population of people that have no experience, we're going to continue down this road of decline. They need to understand what put the food on the table, where it comes from, how it's produced, how it's protected, and the individuals and the amount of effort that's going into putting the food on the table.
Right.
And
right.
until they understand that, there's a very minute group of people left in that world, because we're raised on concrete slabs and townhouses around home so much. Are you going to kill that animal? Yes, ma'am. I'm going to take and put the animal down. I'm going to euthanize it. I want it relocated. I said, okay, I'll take my animal and bring it to your house.
Yeah.
No, I don't want that.
Exactly.
I don't want that. I just want the animal released. Let it go. Well, that's one thing that the people who are in the nuisance wildlife business, I really contest the fact that they'll tell a person, okay, oh yeah, I'll relocate it. Reality is they're lying to the people. The education that Dad and we decided to tell them the truth. You're educating people, and it's very beneficial across the board. Every person I touch feels they ought to be relocated. I really spend some time on the phone with them.
In addition to that, when I was fur bearer biologist, one of the earliest regulations I got through was to make it illegal to relocate animals in Maryland.
Yeah. Yeah. We unfortunately have that in Indiana. They have to release it within the county that it was caught, but we still have it. And we actually had a mandatory proposal that everything be euthanized last year, and of course the antis came out, and so it was actually they chickened out and withdrew it. So
even if you release it in the same county, the same inherent biological problems occur on most common species, which fur bearers are. When you relocate them, you're releasing them somewhere where the habitat's already filled and it's at carrying capacity, so
Right.
there isn't room for them.
Right.
So either they get kicked out, especially with beaver, and continually kicked out of areas, and you have associated stress with that and injuries, and they die. Essentially, eventually they die. Or you have disease transmission, or they just become a nuisance animal for someone else.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just basically making the problem even worse.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's it's like the people that are, I'm not even going to say good intention, that go and release a bunch of ranch mink. It's like that animal was never made to survive in the wild anyways, so it's just absolutely ridiculous. But trapping. So Ron, you guys, for your fox trapping, primarily dirt hole sets?
Yes. Dad and I developed the tapered step down set, and later on out in Texas we developed that point set, what we call, that's in our books and videos. And somebody said, when are you going to write another book? Well, I don't have nothing else to tell. This is the way it's done, this is the way it works. And the reason we were able to put up numbers is we found something that worked consistent. And it's like being in a factory. When it works consistent, you just be repetitive in that motion, and you get a lot done. So we started out with double dirt holes, maybe 10 to 20 feet apart, making tapered step-down sets, and putting K9 exciter lure down the hole. We drive a mile to 2 mile, sometimes 5, depending on permission. Do the same thing.
Yeah.
Do the same thing. Please do the same thing, because it works.
Yep.
And I tried to stress that in our class out there. I had students in fur takers class that I felt were as superior to catching foxes as I was. And they just didn't understand, well, how you catch all those foxes? Well, how long you trap during the day?
Yeah.
Oh, I got about an hour in the morning. Well, wake up. I got all day.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm doing the same thing while you're in a factory, buddy.
Yeah.
I applaud you for even taking time to trap
Right.
in the first place.
But Ron, I agree with everything you said.
You
And
better.
except for
Yeah, he's the mentor.
Except for me, I like my dirt holes about 5 feet apart. One thing I figured out is how to catch doubles, and part of that came from Ron. But as far as the person asking you how you catch so much, I've become convinced through the years. I've done a lot of trapper education for a lot of years. Really good trappers, like really good hunters, they're born. They're not taught. We can teach people up to a certain level of competency, but there's something ingrained and inherent in the people that are really good.
Well, that's a good point. I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like in a lot of things, but
Yeah.
so you have some sort of, whatever you want to call it, God-given talent or something that's ingrained in you that is able to take you up to that next
Yeah.
level, for sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
You
yeah.
know.
But that's how I looked. Dad and I looked at it, and we did that. Didn't matter what species we were trapping. Granted, in the water, you use a multitude of variety because of the situation, but when it came to fox trapping, that's what we did. Did the same thing with coyote. One thing I have found with the coyote population in the east here, that these coyotes, they really don't have any home territory because the populations hadn't got to where they are actually have their own territory. So they're going through about every 2 weeks, passing through. So the opportunity to put their foot on a trap is limited, number one. But I also see quite a few occasions where they actually walk past the traps, and I've tried numerous lures. I actually do that, especially working in the nuisance business like I am. I've used a multitude of lures that's on the market today, not just the canine exciter. I'll change up. I'll use urine posts or post sets, blind sets. I use anything I can to encourage the catch of it. But the coyotes are really an issue as being consistent, other than in Texas and Wyoming and the western states when we were there. You could stay consistent, use one style set, one type lure. The population was so heavy that the catches was consistently coming in.
Mm-hmm.
It totally different than it is here in the east.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone listening to this cast in the east here, I get a lot of complaints from the eastern trappers. Well, I can't catch them coyotes, and man, they're giving me a fit. It's a long waiting process.
Right.
You got to educate yourself and change up. I had a coyote walking within 10 feet of a double set for a week. He'd jump over a mud hole. Guess how I caught him? He was landing on the other side of the mud hole. I put his foot in the trap one morning.
There you go.
But be versatile in what you do. If you got something that works, stay with it.
All right, guys, sorry for the interruption. We got to do a little product highlight here. We have Charlie is the maker of Leatherwood Creek Trapping Scents, which most of you know about if you listen to this. But I'm going to pick one lure in particular here that's our number one seller. It's the Vixen Elixir. It's been out for a number of years, so it's been tested all over the country. Works well for us. It's kind of one of our go-tos, especially when we're on trips. Yeah, it's a curiosity lure. It's not overbearingly, just crazy smell, loud volume with skunk or anything like that. It's just got the right amount of top quality ingredients that he's put in there. I can't tell you exactly what's in there. Charlie might kill me, but he's got, good proportion of top quality ingredients and aging to make this lure really effective. Works on all predators, so not just canines. Great on bobcats too. And if you haven't tried it, you definitely want to give it a shot. We sell it in 1 ounce bottle size for $7. The 4 ounce bottle size is $24. And you can get that at HoosierTrapperSupply.com, or you can just call us here at the shop and we'll gladly take your order. But like I said, it's a go-to lure. It's awesome. Definitely grabs the sniffer of any predator coming by to investigate your set. So, all right, let's get back to the conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, and what Ron said about consistency is one of the keys. I watch most trappers, and I guess it's basic human nature. They overcomplicate things.
Oh, yeah.
Trapping's a thinking game, and you got to do that.
Ain't
But
that the truth?
you don't want to overthink it. And when you're using 8 lures in 5 different types of sets, you can't attain that consistency. And then you can't sit back and logically analyze what's contributing to your success.
Right.
So you use a couple different things, and you thoroughly evaluate it. And then if there's problems, you can pick up what's causing those problems. And the other thing I tell my students out at the Trappers College, if you're on location, the key to catching an animal, whether it's a terrestrial fur bearer or aquatic one, is if you can control their eyes and control their nose, you can make them step where you want to the vast majority of the time. You know, it's not rocket science. It's just thinking about how the animal behaves and animal behavior and how they're going to approach your attractant.
Right,
So,
right. You're primarily a dirt hole person too, Robert?
well, I'd say, especially now with the type of work I do, when I was just straight fur trapping, I would set 2 dirt holes. I don't use a step down, and I use a step or a set that I came up with. I put 2 of them about 5 feet apart, and I like to be 5 miles down the road. So I'm outside the home range size of the fox, and I don't want to compete against myself. And I'd run 100, 125 miles a day, and I'd have maybe 30 locations set with 2 traps at each location. And as long as you're on good locations and good dispersal routes, and Ron talked about dispersal when we first started, you know, you have young of the year animals coming in, you can catch from those places for the whole season. If you're not on a dispersal route, you'll go in and bam, 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 you take out the resident animals, and then you don't catch anything else. You could leave for a month, then come back, and they should have been backfilled by then. But to be real efficient, I like my locations to be on dispersal routes, and I could run them for as long as I wanted to. You know, the first day you may catch a single, but then after then, and you'd catch the rest of the resident animals, and every day or two you'd pop a double and then a single, and those were all dispersing young of the year animals coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I did that over a large area, and I didn't have to have a lot of locations set up, and I was just placing my traps and my attractants in front of the maximum number of animals that I could.
Mm-hmm.
It's all a numbers game.
Right, right. And the dispersal route, which I think a lot of people have trouble with, and you know, you're limited a lot of times by the permission that you have
Yeah.
and the number of places that you're able to go. So in a lot of cases, trappers are trapping against themselves because they're trapping the same animals on too close
Well, they
nearby
get
farms.
permission on one farm, and then Uncle Jim, the farmer's Uncle Jim, that's one farm down. Oh, he'll let you trap there, and cousin Susie across the street. So you're trapping the same animals, whether it be fox or coons, on all those places. And you know, if you got out 8, 10 traps, they would be better used placing them in front of new animals,
Right.
instead of against yourself.
Right, right.
I had an instance. Robert said he likes to stay 5 mile. Well, we set a lot of places within a mile, but you could feel, you knew when you hurt yourself, trapping against yourself, Robert said. And that's exactly what we could feel. One instant that I really, it goes back in my mind, and I caught a female fox, the only fox I caught in that place, across the road. It was about 3/4 of a mile away, maybe a little more. And I thought, where is that male? Well, I'm not catching anything else. I finally caught a male that far away, like 3/4 of a mile. Seemed like the only 2 fox in the area at that time. It was down in Royersville where we used to hold our conventions. Never forgot the fields or the locations. To do that and and to understand population densities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's just those two in there. You know what you do when you don't have stuff in your traps? You get them out of there and go somewhere and try to find new ones.
I know if you're on location and you've got good populations, you know, I know Ron does, and I did. I routinely caught 20, 25 fox out of 2 traps side by side.
Yeah.
My best location, I caught over 50 out of 2 traps side by side.
That's crazy.
And we had good populations.
Yeah.
And I was on the correct location. I was on dispersal routes.
Right.
I took 42 one time. Most ever got one spot, and I was actually up behind Dad's farm there.
Oh, that's something. I don't think even back when Indiana had a number of red foxes, I don't remember anybody ever doing that.
You know, another part of the puzzle on that, one, you got to be on location.
Right.
You got to understand your lures. You got to understand the sets you're using, because the sets you're using have to be a function of the lure you're using, because you get different reactions.
Right.
But part of the puzzle is learning how to catch doubles.
Yeah.
Doubles really pick your numbers up fast. And to catch doubles, you got to be in a visible location, so that once you hook that first one, it's a lure for anyone that's traveling 200 yards away.
Sure.
They're going to come there. So that's one of the keys to catching a lot of animals.
So when you're actually, you've got your 2 sets within 5 foot of each other.
Yeah.
So, but far enough apart that one set wouldn't be affected by the catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, every now and then, I miscalculate. And you either have the
Back
fox
foot,
hooked,
stretch him out.
either one, you'll have front foot and back foot, or sometimes you'll have a double and they just eat each other up, pull tufts of fur out and everything else.
Mm-hmm. So you need to tape measure.
No, I wonder. I don't want to beat me and Dad's drum, but before Dad and I started working together, each of us making a set out each side of the truck and starting a double, we never heard anybody talk about doing doubles.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it was also said to us when we got ready to write our first book, a fox book, this gentleman said to us, you're not going to tell them what you do, are you? Yes. Why would Dad and I write a book
Right.
if we didn't put it together?
Right.
Oh, okay. A little more story to that I can't say on the podcast, but that was a learning education of previous materials that had been put in print. I think E.J. Daly was the closest thing, the book he wrote was the closest thing that Dad and I ever found that resembled what we did.
Mm-hmm.
E.J. Daly, I think, actually put it in print.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way you can catch a lot of fox.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, but the double thing, I just don't know if anybody talked about it, but as Robert brought it up there, and that's why I'm reiterating it here, that it is very beneficial in the canine trapping. Actually, any species, multiple sets. Raccoon, in particular, is good with that also.
I know I only set 2 traps at a location, and I certainly many times would have caught triples. Maybe if I'd set 4, I'd have caught 4. But at least the way I approach trapping is I know statistically I'm way better off to have that extra trap or those extra 2 traps at a different location, placing it in front of different animals.
Right.
My catch ratio is going to be much higher.
Right.
Right.
And plus, you're going to be there for a length of time, unlike some of these, like a weekend warrior.
Yeah.
You know, if you weekend warrior type of trappers out there, due to work constraints,
Yeah.
they'll just gang set something big time.
And
Exactly.
and I have to trap differently with the work I do now, because in many of these instances, I'm not covering 100 miles a day. I'm covering smaller areas for a shorter period of time. And I may put more than 2 traps on an area. Now, they wouldn't be side by side,
Right.
but it may be a different location, just because I've got to get in and out of there a lot quicker, and I can't miss anything. Where before, fur trapping, you don't want to miss stuff, but if you do, big deal. As long as you get the majority, you move out. With the stuff I do now, I don't have that luxury. You know, I got to kill. as many things as I can, as efficiently and quickly as I can, so that I can impact survivability of these threatened and endangered species. And one good thing, contrary to some of the stuff that humaniacs put out now about if you kill coyotes or whatever species, it just increases reproduction. Well, it doesn't increase reproduction unless that female was stressed. But beyond that, in the areas where I've done this work in successive years, they've seen dramatic increases in the numbers of the threatened and endangered species. And on those species, they do real intense population monitoring, so I know that it's valid. So trapping really, really does affect survivability of threatened and endangered species, as long as you structure your strategies correctly and you do it the right time of the year.
Do you have to, I'm assuming then that you would have to follow up in a year or 2 years, and it's just ongoing.
Yeah, it's got to be ongoing.
Yeah.
You know, with canines, you know, a red fox may disperse 100 miles from where it was born. So I can kill all the fox this year, but unless something happens, you're going to have fox moving in from a lot of adjacent areas.
Right.
Coyotes may disperse up to 150 miles. So you have to do it year after year after year. Now you can, once you get that population down and depressed, you can keep it down, especially like raccoons that have smaller home ranges. There was one little beach the first time I went to New Jersey, and I caught, 48 coons in a week or so off this one little section. And since then, I may get 8, 9 a year. When I go back, the population just isn't there. I depressed it. And it's hard to convince the people that are managing these areas or managing this endangered species that it has to be ongoing. They see the effort in 1 year and they get results and they think you can stop. Well, if you stop, within a year or two, those predator populations are going to be right back to where you started.
Right.
So.
To back up a little bit ago, what you were saying, Ron, is when you wrote your book and somebody says, well, you're not going to put everything in there, or you're not going to...
Yeah.
You know, you run into these guys and say, well, yeah, they don't put their secrets in there. I mean,
No,
there's,
it's
right. And these are the same guys that go, and I know one very specifically, I'm not going to mention his name, but I know one very specifically that thinks there's this unwritten secrets out there that just a few trappers have, and that he doesn't have. And he's one of those guys that's trapping before work, and he makes big catches. I mean,
I was going to say, I already know who you're talking about. We won't mention, but he's a good trapper.
He's a good trapper, but he's limited by checking before work and limited by that time. If he was able to run the whole day with numerous locations and numerous sets, he would make, other than whether he could say he was that echelon that had that natural God-given born ability, that may or may not, but. That idea that you're withholding information, that there is some secret floating around out there is just, that just drives me crazy, quite frankly.
If there's big secrets out there, nobody's told them to me. I can guarantee you. What I've observed, there's a lot of little things that when you add them up, make a big difference. And usually it's in terms of efficiency, keeping sets operable.
Right. And you got to give it effort. I mean, you got to work at it. I mean, that's,
it's that attention to detail that you're talking about that people usually just skip over.
A lot of times there's just this level of obsessive drive to do that day in, day out for long periods of time, which a lot of people just don't want to work that hard at it. So.
Well, trapping is the hardest work I've done physically and mentally. If I'd worked as hard in college at my books as I did at trapping, I'd been a Rhodes Scholar or something.
I just think where you'd be today.
The only thing I'd interject into that conversation, as a lure maker, manufacturer, and studying chemistry, my father died in his chair praying that we would stumble across the answer with lure. We both hit it one time where we had a product that it was just awesome. We made it one time, could never get it made again.
Isn't that something?
Could never get that reproduced. It's better than what I'm selling on the shelf today.
Mm-hmm.
We worried with that, and we worried with it. if there's secrets out there, it's mainly in the lure trade. We keep that to ourselves. Some of it is pretty simply made, which is one reason you keep it a secret. And the other one is there's chemicals and things used. And then, Dad and I studying chemistry like we did, we understand that you can't be telling everybody what you're using out there if you're trying to sell it.
Right.
Why you want to cut your own throat.
Right.
So those secrets are definitely in place. The other thing that you brought up, Charlie, with somebody saying, I know there's something better. I hear it all the time.
I know.
I just get out of the truck and work. The guys that and the gals that go out here and set a few traps, they get a mental stigma to them. They don't understand that it takes a larger area.
Right.
You're doing it right, for
Right.
God's sake. Just
Right.
you've got to take time to do it.
Right. Larger area, not trapping against yourself and having the time
Yes.
available and the equipment available, the
Yes.
traps to set.
They don't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
And they don't look on a big enough scale, because what influences what's happening on the farm you're trapping maybe occurred 5 miles away.
Yeah.
Because you got to look at things on a landscape level, because that's what funnels animal movements down to the circle of your trap, to the trap pan. And you got to look on a continuous scale
Right.
to get there. I've had farms that have gone dead, and I could look at the farm and not see anything different. But if I'd go 2 or 3 miles down the road, there had been major changes on part of that dispersal route, and it was causing the animals to shift around.
Right. And I think those of us that live near an urban area with development, those see that fairly
Yeah.
often.
Yep.
So
That's a good point.
it's obviously most of us are not trapping remote or wilderness areas where may not be any significant change in years. So
But as Ron said earlier, as long as nothing's changed, if the landscape is the same, you'll catch within a handful of animals the same number every single year, as long as you've got a similar level of effort in there.
right.
It doesn't change.
Right.
I think we found that hot spot, that dispersal route sort of spot that you've been talking about. We found that 2 years ago, and it's been.
Yeah, I mean it's it's up against an interstate. It's got everything working for it. So it's just one of those
Interstates are
deals.
great dispersal routes.
Right.
The dispersal routes, by and large, are long, continuous obstacles, barriers, or just funnels.
Right.
And animals don't necessarily run all the time on those, but they'll bounce out, bounce back in, looking for an unoccupied territory. And I use interstates a lot.
Yeah.
Interstates, rivers, power line, all those things function as dispersal routes.
Right. I mean, you occasionally see a coyote hit on the highway, but in general, you don't. So, they're more running parallel with it, or so they're not crossing it.
Staying on that subject, our dispersal route in the east here is normally in that northwesterly direction, because that's our general winds. So your animals has a tendency to constantly migrate in that direction. And Dad and I wasn't trapping together at that time. We had done separated, and him going 2 other counties. But one area over here, a larger stream intersected with the Potomac River that separates Maryland and West Virginia. And that particular section is facing narrow from the east to the west. Well, I went in there and caught 20-some fox out of this triangle. If you visualize a triangle with the northwest wind blowing in the widest end of it, there's no travel route that directly connects that area down in there. The depth of that is about 3 to 4 mile deep, and those canines that are migrating to the northwest miss that turn. So when Robert said that they spear off from that travel route or dispersal route at times, that's what took to refill that void in there. It took several years for me to go back there and catch any number of fox. Once I cleaned that it's a pretty good section, really.
Right.
But it's small enough that their area that they covered encompassed where I had traps,
Mm-hmm.
and I knocked it right out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And it took 3 or 4 years before I started picking up any fox in there again.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to think about that in your thought process. Look at the map or the topo maps of how that lays, and understand why last year I got them. What's wrong this year?
Right.
Sometimes that occurs.
Right.
It's been made much easier nowadays, and
Right.
back when I started, you got Google Earth and all
Right.
that stuff.
It's incredibly easy.
I used to have to go to the USDA office and look at black and white photos.
Yeah.
And then ride around and around looking. But it's much easier, and it's so logical. I give a presentation on location. I've been doing it for 30 years. It amazes me that so few trappers can ever figure it out, because it is logical. It's truly logical. You set your traps where the longest and most travel routes intersect.
Right.
If you only set where there's one travel route, you can only catch animals from that travel route. But if you got 3 travel routes, then you can catch the animals from 3 travel routes. And why people don't understand that or figure it out is beyond me, because I'm not the brightest bulb in the world.
Fairly bright.
But I can, it baffles me at times.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's part of that. Some people are meant to be better trappers than
Yeah.
others, So I think that does kind of go hand in hand. Anyways.
Got any concluders here? Should we wrap this thing up?
That would be good, because we're getting sunburned
I'm burning
on
up
my
too.
bald head.
I'll say something before we leave. It's been an honor just to sit here and listen to you guys talking about
Thank you.
big picture stuff. And without Charlie, I wouldn't even be into this. And not only is the knowledge being spread at, at conventions like this, and you guys telling your stories, and I hope people take notice and more about the passion they have for it and the drive for it, because that's what it really takes to become a good trapper.
Mm.
You got to live the lifestyle, like we said.
Right.
So I appreciate you guys being on the show, and I ran in Robert at the Trappers College, which we mentioned, and I do the media there, so I had the advantage of jumping around to multiple groups and seeing what people are doing. I always key in on what Robert's doing, and I will say his class is probably the funnest. You guys have the most fun, but
Yeah.
the amount of information you're giving out to the people is well worth the trip alone.
Yeah, we believe in mutual abuse at our group.
Yeah, I see that.
I've seen that.
And then
I remember the year that you were having pretty bad back issues. You were in
Mhm.
pain. And then on the graduation day, or the day that they get their
Oh, that
certificates.
boy.
Yeah, he picks you up.
Yeah, because I said, let's not give him his certificate. Let him think he didn't pass. Remember that?
Yeah.
And that's when we finally called him up. He grabbed me and picked me up.
Yeah. Of course, you had to go into traction
I
afterwards.
liked that boy. I harassed him for the whole week.
Yeah.
But he reminded me of myself when I was 30 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I knew him very casually that week, but he was a good kid. So
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
And I'll say too, Ron, on getting involved with Charlie and him selling your books and DVDs, that you were one of the first. You and I think Dobbins. I watched one of his DVDs on Beaver. You were one of the first, and some of Tom's stuff that you would play. Tom Miranda's videos were some of the first videos I saw. So it's finally great to meet you in person, crossing paths. So
Well, we appreciate the opportunity to hand out their information if possible, and keep people involved. Today, trapping to the youth comes very quickly, where we fought and studied to learn it. But today, if you want to become a trapper, some of the best knowledge that you'll ever find is available through the Fur Takers College, through your local state organization as well. They've got trapping classes, and they ought to take the opportunity to at least venture in to take a look at that and what a difference in your lifestyle it can make. It's more family oriented than anything you'll ever get involved in. I like it a lot better than baseball. So
Yeah.
it's very nice.
Yeah.
It's an honor, very much an honor, to be even considered to be on a podcast. I don't think I have anything extra to offer to anyone, but I hope you enjoy what we talked about.
Yeah, I sure appreciate it. So,
All right,
you
then.
got any concluders, Robert?
That's it.
Don't overthink it. Learn animal behavior, learn locations, learn how animals react to the lures you use, and become active in your trapping association.
Yeah. And I want to say, as a concluder, I want to appreciate you guys' lifelong effort, dedication to trapping. I know it comes by a love of what we do and a passion for what we do. And I hope that there's enough people coming up through the years that they can take the spot of those that are in the forefront of things today. So I want this to go on forever. It's certainly sustainable biologically to continue to go on, but we need people that are dedicated to this. So, and I hope in the years to come, there's people that will take your places. So,
I do too.
anyways, we sure appreciate you guys being on. So.
Thanks for asking.